The terminal buzzed with the familiar chaos of afternoon travelers, but 11-year-old Emma Rodriguez walked through it all with a sense of wonder that made everything feel brand new. Her navy blue backpack bounced against her shoulders as she clutched the boarding pass like a golden ticket, her eyes darting from the departure boards to the massive windows overlooking the tarmac where planes lined up like patient birds waiting their turn to soar. "You doing okay, sweetie?" The gate agent smiled warmly as she processed Emma's special documentation. The bright yellow lanyard hanging around Emma's neck proclaimed in bold letters, "Unaccompanied minor." It was both a badge of independence and a safety net, marking her first solo journey at 30,000 feet. "I'm great." Emma's voice carried genuine excitement, not the nervousness the agent probably expected. This wasn't fear talking. This was pure, unbridled joy. She'd been preparing for this moment for weeks, counting down the days on her calendar, packing and repacking her carry-on with meticulous care. Her mother had been hesitant at first. "You're so young, Mija," she'd said, worry lines creasing her forehead. But Emma had inherited her grandfather's fearless spirit, and eventually Mom had relented. Grandma Rosa in Seattle had been calling every week, her voice warm and inviting. "I can't wait to see you, me Ammer. We'll bake cookies and visit the Space Needle." But if Emma was being honest with herself, the flight itself excited her almost as much as the destination. For the past 6 months since her grandfather's passing, Emma had been spending hours in his converted garage workshop. Papa Miguel had been a commercial airline pilot for 33 years before retiring, and he'd left behind his greatest treasure, a professional-grade flight simulator worth more than most cars. The equipment was museum quality, authentic Boeing controls, wraparound screens, force feedback yokes, and software so realistic that actual pilots used it for training. Emma had discovered it one rainy afternoon while helping her mother sort through Papa's belongings. The moment she sat in that captain's seat, adjusted the pedals with wooden blocks Papa had crafted for younger students, and gripped the yoke, something clicked. She wasn't just playing a game. She was connecting with her grandfather's legacy, hearing his patient voice in her memory. "Smooth on the controls, Emma. The plane wants to fly. Your job is to guide it, not force it." Night after night she'd practiced. Takeoffs from Phoenix Sky Harbor, landings in crosswinds, engine failure scenarios, emergency descents. Her notebook filled with handwritten procedures copied from Papa's old training manuals. Her mother thought it was a healthy way to grieve. Emma knew it was something more, something that made her feel close to the grandfather she missed desperately. Flight 2847 to Seattle, now boarding all passengers. The announcement echoed through the gate area. Emma's heart leaped. This was it. The flight attendant assigned to accompany her was named Kelly, a cheerful woman with kind eyes who walked Emma down the jet bridge. "First time flying alone?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." Emma tried to sound calm, but her grin gave her away. The moment she stepped onto the aircraft, Emma's trained eye began cataloging details. Boeing 737-800. She recognized it instantly from her simulator sessions. The distinctive winglets, the cabin layout, even the smell of recycled air mixed with coffee and cleaning solution felt familiar. She noted the cockpit door standing open, catching a glimpse of the pilots running through their pre-flight checklist. The captain was older, maybe in his 50s, with silver hair and confident movements. The first officer looked younger, late 20s perhaps, his uniform still crisp and new-looking. They were laughing about something, completely at ease, professional, experienced, safe. Emma felt a flutter of excitement. Those men would be flying her to Seattle, threading this massive machine through the sky with the same precision Papa had demonstrated thousands of times. "Here we are, 14A window seat as requested," Kelly announced, helping Emma stow her backpack in the overhead compartment. Emma settled in, immediately claiming the armrest and peering out the small oval window. The wing stretched out before her, its massive flaps currently retracted, fuel vents visible on the trailing edge. Other passengers filed past, business travelers in suits typing on laptops, families wrangling excited children, an elderly couple holding hands. 147 souls boarding Flight 2847, each trusting that this routine afternoon would unfold exactly as planned. "Can I get you anything before takeoff?" Kelly asked. "Water, juice." "I'm good, thank you." Emma pulled out her grandfather's old aviation watch from her pocket, a vintage Breitling he'd worn for 30 years. She wasn't allowed to wear it yet. It was too valuable, too precious. But she carried it everywhere, a talisman of the man who taught her that the sky wasn't a limit but an invitation. The engines began their distinctive whine, building from a whisper to a powerful hum that Emma could feel through the seat. She pressed her palm against the window, feeling the slight vibration. The auxiliary power unit kicked on. Hydraulics pressurized. Outside, the ground crew gave their signals. The captain's voice came over the PA system, smooth and reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds. We've been cleared for departure. Flight time to Seattle will be approximately 2 hours and 45 minutes. Should be smooth sailing today with clear skies most of the way. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." Emma's smile widened. Clear skis, perfect. The 737 pushed back from the gate, and Emma watched the terminal slide away. They taxied toward the runway, joining the orderly queue of departing aircraft. She could almost hear Papa's voice narrating each step. "Check the instruments. Verify flaps. Set takeoff power. Rotate at V1. The engines roared to full power. The brakes released. Acceleration pressed Emma back into her seat as the runway lights blurred past her window. The nose lifted. The ground fell away. They were flying. Phoenix spread out below like a toy city, the desert beyond stretching to distant mountains. Emma's heart soared with the aircraft, climbing through 10,000 feet, then 20,000, finally leveling off at their cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. She'd done it. Her first solo flight, everything was absolutely perfect. Emma closed her eyes, contentment washing over her. In 30 minutes, she'd be sipping apple juice and maybe watching a movie on her tablet. In 3 hours, Grandma Rosa would be waiting at arrivals with her famous bear hugs. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers unbuckled, stretched, began moving about the cabin. Flight attendants prepared the beverage service. Everything utterly, completely, beautifully normal. Emma had no idea that her perfect day was about to become the most terrifying, an extraordinary day of her young life. She had no idea that the pre-flight meals both pilots had eaten were contaminated. She had no idea that in 28 minutes, those 2 experienced professionals would be unconscious. She had no idea that her 6 months in Papa's simulator weren't just grief therapy or a hobby. They were preparation for a miracle. 28 minutes into the flight, Emma was lost in the clouds. Not literally. The Boeing 737 cruised smoothly at 35,000 feet, autopilot engaged, the ride as steady as her mother's sedan on the interstate. But Emma's mind wandered through those white towers outside her window, imagining what Papa Miguel would say about the cloud formations, the way sunlight turned their edges to gold, the invisible currents of air that held this metal giant aloft. She just pulled out her tablet when she heard it. A muffled thump from somewhere forward in the cabin. Most passengers didn't notice. A businessman across the aisle kept typing. A mother, too, rose up, continued reading to her toddler. But Emma's senses, sharpened by months of studying emergency scenarios, picked up on the wrongness of that sound. Then she saw Kelly, the friendly flight attendant, moving quickly, too quickly, toward the front galley. Not the casual walk of someone checking on passengers. This was urgent, purposeful. Her smile had vanished. Emma sat up straighter, her grandfather's instincts stirring in her chest. Another flight attendant, a tall man named Marcus whose name tag she'd noticed during boarding, rushed past her row. His face had gone pale, his jaw clenched. He disappeared behind the forward curtain that separated economy from the cockpit area. Something was wrong. The plane suddenly dipped. It wasn't dramatic, maybe 50 feet of altitude loss, but Emma felt it instantly in her stomach. The subtle change in engine pitch, the slight nose-down attitude. Several passengers gasped. A woman clutched her husband's arm. Then the aircraft corrected, leveling out again. The autopilot had compensated, Emma realized. That was good. That meant the automation was working. But why had the plane dipped in the first place? She pressed her face closer to the window, looking out at the wing. The flaps were still retracted. Position lights functioning normally. No smoke. No visible damage. Whatever was happening, it wasn't mechanical. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The PA announcement came from Marcus, his voice tight and controlled, but Emma could hear the tremor underneath. Years of listening to Papa critique pilot communications had trained her ear for stress markers. The cabin erupted in whispers. "What's going on? Did you feel that drop? Is everything okay?" Emma's heart began to race, but her mind stayed oddly clear. It was like stepping into the simulator for an emergency scenario. Fear existed, yes, but it ran parallel to a growing sense of focus. She watched Marcus emerge from behind the curtain, saw him exchange rapid whispers with Kelly. Then Kelly did something that made Emma's blood run cold. She picked up the handset for the PA system, took a visible breath and spoke. "Is there anyone on board with flight experience? Anyone who has piloted an aircraft? Please press your call button immediately." The cabin went silent. Dead, terrible silence. Then chaos. "Oh my God, what does that mean? Are the pilots okay? Mommy, I'm scared. Someone answer her. Does anyone know how to fly?" Emma watched as passengers looked around desperately. An older man, 3, rows back, raised his hand tentatively. I have a private pilot's license. Cessnas. Small planes. But I haven't flown in 10 years and I've never." "Please come forward, sir," Kelly said, her professionalism barely masking her desperation. The man unbuckled and stumbled toward the front, his face ashen. Emma could see his hands shaking from her seat. This was bad. This was really, really bad. She caught fragments of urgent conversation from the galley area. Kelly's voice, low but carrying, both of them, unconscious, not responding, same symptoms. The captain was sick first, then the first officer started vomiting. Food poisoning. The words clicked in Emma's mind. Both pilots down, probably from whatever they'd eaten before the flight, catering contamination. She'd read about it in one of Papa's aviation safety books, a rare but catastrophic scenario. The private pilot emerged from the cockpit 30 seconds later, shaking his head, his face the color of ash. "I can't. That's a commercial jet. I've never even been in a 737 cockpit. The instruments alone. I'll kill everyone. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." A woman screamed. A child started crying. Panic rippled through the cabin like a physical wave. Emma's hands gripped the armrests. Her mind raced through everything she knew. Boeing 737-800, two-person crew requirement. Autopilot could maintain altitude and heading, but it couldn't land the plane. Someone would have to disengage the automation, configure the aircraft for approach, manage the descent rate, deploy flaps and landing gear in sequence, control airspeed, align with the runway, execute the flare, and touch down safely. Someone would have to fly this plane. Kelly was back on the PA, her voice cracking now. "Please, if anyone has any flight experience at all, simulators, military training, anything, we need your help, please." Silence. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. Her mouth went dry. The rational part of her brain screamed that she was 11 years old, that she'd never flown a real aircraft, that her experience was software and screens and the safety of Papa's garage. But another voice, Papa's voice, spoke clearly in her mind. Emma, the simulator isn't a game, it's training. Real pilots use the same systems. The physics are identical. The procedures are exact. If you can fly it there, you can fly it anywhere. She thought about her logbook. 212 hours. 43 successful landings in various conditions. Emergency procedure drills until she could recite them in her sleep. Crosswind landings. Engine out procedures. Instrument approaches in zero visibility. She looked around the cabin, at the terrified mother holding her baby, at the elderly couple gripping each other's hands, at the teenage girl across the aisle, tears streaming down her face. 147 people. All going to die if nobody flew this plane. Emma's hand trembled as she unbuckled her seatbelt. Her legs felt weak as she stood. Every eye in the nearby rows turned to her. This small girl with the unaccompanied minor lanyard, barely tall enough to see over the seat backs. "I can help," she said, her voice quiet but clear. A man laughed, actually laughed, a desperate, disbelieving sound. "Sit down, kid, this isn't a joke." But Kelly heard her. The flight attendant pushed through the aisle, kneeling down to Emma's eye level. Up close, Emma could see the fear in the woman's eyes, the barely controlled terror. "Sweetie, I appreciate it, but—" "Boeing 737-800, Emma interrupted, her voice steadier now. "Maximum takeoff weight 174,200 pounds. 2 CFM56-7B turbofan engines. Cruising speed Mach 0.785. V-speeds vary by weight, but rotate is typically 140 to 160 knots. My grandfather was Captain Miguel Rodriguez, 33 years with Southwest Airlines. He left me his Level D flight simulator. I've logged over 200 hours on this exact aircraft type." Kelly stared at her, mouth slightly open. "I know the emergency procedures," Emma continued. "I know how to configure for landing. I know the approach speeds, the flap settings, how to use the ILS, how to execute a go-around if needed. I've practiced engine failures, hydraulic failures, electrical failures. I know this plane." The cabin had gone silent again, but this was a different silence. Not panic, something else. Hope, disbelief, desperation. Kelly's eyes filled with tears. She looked back toward the cockpit, then back at Emma. Behind them, Marcus was on the radio with air traffic control, his voice urgent. "We need options. Nobody on board can fly this aircraft. Nobody, we need. I don't know what we need." Kelly made a decision that would either save everyone or haunt her forever. "Come with me," she said, taking Emma's hand. As Emma walked down the aisle toward the cockpit, passengers stared in horror, in hope, in disbelief. A little girl. Their last chance. Their only chance. The cockpit door swung open. Emma stepped into a pilot's worst nightmare, and her destiny. The cockpit was smaller than Emma expected. In Papa's simulator, she'd had the luxury of space, room to move around, to adjust her seat, to think. But here, the real thing pressed in on all sides. Switches and dials and screens covered every surface. The yoke jutted out from the instrument panel like skeletal hands reaching toward her, and slumped in their seats, unconscious and pale, were 2 men who should have been flying this airplane. Captain Reynolds lay back against his headrest, his silver hair dark with sweat. Vomit stained his uniform shirt. His breathing was shallow, raspy. The first officer was worse, doubled over his controls, barely breathing, his skin an alarming shade of gray-green. Emma's stomach lurched, but she forced herself to look away, to focus on the instruments. The autopilot was engaged. She could see the illuminated button on the mode control panel. Altitude hold at 35,000 feet, heading 330 degrees, airspeed 485 knots. The aircraft was flying itself for now, but that wouldn't last forever. They needed to descend. They needed to land. They needed a pilot. "Marcus is getting them out," Kelly said behind her, her voice shaking. "We'll move them to the cabin, get them medical attention. But Emma, sweetie, are you absolutely sure about this? Because if you're not, I'm sure. Emma surprised herself with how firm her voice sounded. I need to sit down. I need to reach the controls. Kelly hesitated one more agonizing second, then nodded. Okay, let's do this. Marcus appeared with another flight attendant, a woman named Jennifer. Together they carefully extracted the unconscious pilots from their seats, carrying them back into the cabin where passengers had cleared space. Someone said they were a nurse. Someone else had medical training. They'd do what they could. But the cockpit was Emma's responsibility now. She climbed into the captain's seat, the left seat, just like in Papa's simulator. Her feet dangled above the rudder pedals. The yoke was too far away. Everything was positioned for an adult pilot, not a small 11-year-old girl. I need cushions, Emma said, her mind already problem-solving. Seat cushions from the cabin, at least 3, and something for my feet, a box, a bag, anything solid. Kelly and Marcus scrambled to comply. Within 2 minutes, Emma sat elevated on a stack of cushions, a carry-on suitcase positioned to give her feet purchase on the rudder pedals. It wasn't perfect, but it would work. Her hands found the yoke. The moment her fingers wrapped around that familiar shape, something shifted inside her. The fear didn't disappear, it was still there, a cold weight in her chest, but it became manageable, compartmentalized. This was a Boeing 737-800. She'd flown this aircraft hundreds of times. The only difference was that this time, the stakes were real. Emma, Marcus held up a headset. Air traffic control wants to talk to you. She slipped the headset on, adjusting the microphone. Through the cockpit speakers, she could hear multiple voices, all urgent, all overlapping. ATC, company dispatch, emergency coordinators, everyone trying to figure out what to do with a commercial airliner that had lost both pilots. Emma pressed the push-to-talk button on the yoke. Seattle Center, this is Flight 2847. Her voice sounded small and young in her own ears, but it came out clear. Declaring an emergency. Both pilots are incapacitated, suspected food poisoning. I am the only person on board with any flight knowledge. Static, then. Flight 2847, Seattle Center, copy your emergency. Can you confirm who is speaking? Emma took a breath. My name is Emma Rodriguez. I'm 11 years old. I have over 200 hours on a Level D simulator for this aircraft type. My grandfather was Captain Miguel Rodriguez, retired Southwest Airlines. I know how to fly this plane. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then a different voice came through, older, authoritative, but surprisingly gentle. Emma, this is Captain Mike Harrison, retired Air Force, now working with Seattle ATC. I'm going to be talking you through this every step of the way. Can you tell me what you see on your instruments right now? Emma's eyes scanned the primary flight display. Altitude 35,000 feet, holding steady, heading 330, airspeed 485 knots, autopilot engaged, all engine instruments showing normal, fuel. We have about 90 minutes of fuel remaining. Outstanding, Captain Harrison said, and Emma could hear the relief in his voice. You sound like you know what you're looking at. Now, I need you to tell me honestly, have you ever practiced landing approaches on your simulator? Yes, sir. Many times. ILS approaches, visual approaches, crosswind landings. I've done emergency descents and single-engine landings. I've practiced until my grandfather's procedures became automatic. Your grandfather taught you well, Emma. He'd be very proud right now. Emma's eyes stung with sudden tears, but she blinked them away. No time for that. Papa would tell her to focus, trust the training, fly the airplane. Captain Harrison, she said, what do you need me to do? First thing, you're going to maintain current altitude and heading. Don't touch anything yet. We're clearing airspace all around you. You've got the sky to yourself. Every other aircraft is being diverted. SeaTac Airport is being prepared for your arrival. Emergency vehicles are rolling out as we speak. You've got about 40 minutes before we need to start your descent. We're going to use that time to walk through every step, every switch, every procedure. You're not going to do this alone. I'm going to be right here with you. Emma nodded even though he couldn't see her. Yes, sir, I'm ready. Behind her, Kelly gripped the back of the co-pilot's seat, her knuckles white. In the cabin beyond, 147 passengers sat in terrified silence, their lives balanced on the slim shoulders of a sixth grader who'd learned to fly in her dead grandfather's garage. The radio crackled again. Emma, let's start with the basics. I want you to put your hands on the yoke. Don't move it, just feel it. The autopilot is doing the work right now, but I want you to get a sense of the aircraft. Feel how it responds to the air. Emma wrapped both hands around the yoke. Through the metal and plastic, she could feel subtle vibrations, tiny movements as the autopilot made microcorrections. The plane was alive under her hands, a living thing of metal and fuel and physics. I feel it, she whispered. Good, that's your airplane now, Emma. You're going to take care of it and it's going to take care of you. Trust it. Trust yourself. Marcus leaned in, his voice low. Emma, the passengers are asking, should we tell them about you? Emma thought about that. A plane full of terrified adults, learning that their fate rested with a child. Panic could make things worse, but secrets could too. Tell them the truth, she said quietly. Tell them I've trained for this. Tell them I'm not going to let them down. Marcus nodded and disappeared into the cabin. Emma stared out the windscreen at the endless blue sky ahead. Somewhere beyond that horizon was Seattle, was the runway, was safety. All she had to do was get there. Her grandfather's watch pressed against her leg in her pocket. She could almost hear his voice, calm and steady. You're a natural, Mija. Best student I ever had. I hope you're right, Papa, she whispered, because everyone on this plane is counting on you being right. Captain Harrison's voice came through her headset again. Emma, we're going to begin going through the approach checklist. I want you to find the quick reference handbook. It should be in a pocket near the throttle quadrant. We're going to make sure you know where every control is before you touch anything. Nice and slow, nice and steady. You've got time. Emma pulled out the thick manual, its pages worn from countless hands. She'd studied these procedures on her tablet, memorized them from Papa's training materials. But seeing them here in the actual cockpit made everything startlingly real. She was really going to do this. She was going to land this airplane. The next 15 minutes became a crash course in controlled chaos. Captain Harrison's voice remained Emma's anchor to sanity, as the enormity of the situation rippled outward like shockwaves from an epicenter. What had started as a single aircraft emergency was rapidly becoming a national crisis that would grip the entire aviation industry. Emma, I need you to locate the radio management panel, Captain Harrison instructed. It's on the center pedestal between the two seats. You should see frequency displays and tuning knobs. Emma's eyes found it immediately, exactly where it had been in the simulator. I see it, Captain. Good, right now you're on Seattle center frequency. We're going to keep that line open, but I want you to know that multiple agencies are monitoring this situation. You're going to hear a lot of voices, a lot of activity on the ground. Don't let it distract you. Your job is to listen to me and fly the airplane. Everything else is just noise. Understood? Understood, sir. But even as she said it, Emma could hear the background chatter bleeding through. Urgent voices, radio protocols, the machinery of emergency response grinding into motion. All aircraft in Seattle airspace be advised, emergency traffic. Flight 2847 is priority handling. All arrivals and departures are being held. FAA command, we have a situation. Commercial aircraft, incapacitated crew, minor at the controls. Get me NORAD. Now, we need to verify this isn't a hijacking. Emma's hands tightened on the yoke. This wasn't just about her anymore. Somewhere below, in tower cabs and emergency centers across the Pacific Northwest, hundreds of people were mobilizing. For her, Because of her. Kelly appeared beside her with a bottle of water. You need to stay hydrated, honey. Small sips. Emma nodded, grateful. Her mouth had gone completely dry. She took a drink, the cool water helping to settle her churning stomach. Through the windscreen, the sky remained deceptively peaceful. Brilliant blue above, clouds scattered below like torn cotton. The sun glinted off the wings' polished metal. Everything looked so normal, so safe. But Emma knew better. They were burning fuel with every passing second. Eventually, they'd have to go down, one way or another. Emma, we're going to start running through the approach preparation checklist, Captain Harrison said. We've got about 25 minutes before you need to begin descent. The weather at SeaTac is perfect, clear skies, light winds. You couldn't ask for better conditions. That's good, Emma managed. What's my approach going to be? We're going to set you up for runway 16 right. That's the longest runway, 11,900 feet, more than enough. We'll use the ILS instrument landing system. Do you know how that works? Yes, sir. The ILS gives me electronic guidance. If I follow the glide slope and localizer, they'll guide me straight to the runway. I've practiced it dozens of times. Excellent. Now, here's what's happening on the ground. We've cleared every aircraft within a 100-mile radius. You own the sky, Emma. SeaTac has shut down all other operations. Fire and rescue teams are positioning along the runway. We've got ambulances, fire trucks, everything you could need. The pilots, are they getting medical attention? Emma glanced back through the cockpit door. She could see passengers huddled around the two unconscious men, the nurse administering oxygen from portable bottles. Yes, sir. We have a nurse on board. They're doing what they can. Good, now listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you is important. There are a lot of people watching this situation, Emma. News media, government agencies, other pilots. Some people are going to doubt you can do this. They're going to say you're too young, too inexperienced. I need you to block all of that out. I've been flying for 42 years. I've trained hundreds of pilots. And I'm telling you right now, you can do this. Emma felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but opening. A flood of determination mixed with fear and hope and desperate courage. I won't let them down, she whispered. I won't let anyone down. I know you won't. Suddenly, a new voice cut into the frequency, sharp, official, unmistakably military. Seattle Center, this is NORAD Command. We need immediate clarification on Flight 2847. What is the actual status of the cockpit? Emma's breath caught. NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command, the people who tracked potential threats to national security. Captain Harrison responded smoothly. NORAD, Seattle Center. Flight 2847 has experienced dual pilot incapacitation due to suspected food poisoning. The individual currently at the controls is Emma Rodriguez, age 11, civilian. This is a medical emergency, not a security threat. Repeat, not a security threat. A pause, then, copy that, Seattle. We're scrambling interceptors for visual confirmation. F-22s will be on station in 12 minutes. Emma's eyes widened. Fighter jets. They were sending fighter jets to look at her. Kelly must have seen the fear flash across Emma's face. She squeezed Emma's shoulder gently. It's just procedure, sweetie. They need to see for themselves that everything is, well, as okay as it can be. Marcus poked his head into the cockpit. Emma, the passengers want to know what's happening. What should I tell them? Emma thought carefully. Tell them we're in contact with air traffic control. Tell them we have a plan. Tell them we're going to land safely in Seattle in about 40 minutes. Tell them to stay calm and trust the process. Should I tell them about the fighter jets? No, Emma's voice was firm. That'll just scare them. They don't need to know every detail. They just need to know we're going to be okay. Marcus nodded and retreated. Captain Harrison was back in her ear. Emma, let's talk fuel. Can you read me your fuel quantity? Emma scanned the center display. showing 8,400 pounds remaining. Perfect. That gives us plenty of cushion. Even if something goes wrong on first approach, we have fuel for a go-around and a second attempt, but we're not going to need it. You're going to nail this landing on the first try. How can you be so sure? Emma asked, her voice small. Because I've listened to you for the last 20 minutes. You know this airplane. You speak the language. You think like a pilot. Your grandfather trained you right, Emma. Now it's time to show everyone what Miguel Rodriguez's granddaughter can do. Tears blurred Emma's vision, but she blinked them away furiously. No crying. Not now. Not when 147 people needed her to be strong. The radio crackled with another update. Flight 2847, be advised, all major news networks are reporting your situation. The story is going national. Ground support requests you maintain focus and ignore external distractions. Emma almost laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. News networks. The whole country was watching. A little girl from Phoenix trying to land a commercial jet. No pressure. Captain Harrison, Emma said, I think I'm ready to start the descent checklist. I want to review everything before we begin the approach. That's exactly the right attitude. Let's go through it step by step. First, you're going to need to reduce your altitude from 35,000 feet to pattern altitude of about 3,000 feet. We'll do this gradually, controlled, nice and smooth. When I give you the word, you're going to disengage the altitude hold on the autopilot and select a vertical speed of negative 1,500 feet per minute. Do you know where that control is? Yes, sir. Mode control panel, vertical speed selector. Outstanding. Now, as you descend, you'll need to reduce power slightly to maintain your target airspeed. We're going to keep you at 250 knots until we're closer to the airport, then we'll slow down further for the approach. The aircraft will want to speed up in the descent. You'll need to manage that with throttle adjustments. Emma nodded, her hands hovering near the controls, not touching, just familiarizing herself with their positions. She could do this. She had to do this. Outside the cockpit window, the world waited. Fighter jets were screaming toward her position. News helicopters would soon be circling. Emergency vehicles lined runways like toy cars. And somewhere in that beautiful, terrifying sky, a little girl who'd learned to fly in her grandfather's garage was about to attempt the impossible. Captain Harrison, Emma said quietly, let's bring her home. 12 minutes earlier, at Joint Base Lewis McChord, Major Lisa Torres had been reviewing training schedules in the squadron ready room when the emergency klaxon shattered the afternoon calm. Scramble, scramble, 2 aircraft immediate launch. Torres dropped her coffee and ran. Beside her, Captain James "Hawk" Hawkins moved with the same trained urgency, their boots pounding across the tarmac toward their waiting F-22 Raptors. Ground crews swarmed the sleek fighters, pulling chocks, disconnecting power umbilicals. What's the situation? Torres shouted over the screaming, jet engines already spooling up. The crew chief handed her a tablet with the mission briefing. Commercial airliner Flight 2847, both pilots down. NORAD wants visual confirmation. Possible hijacking, possible medical emergency. Unknown individual at controls. Torres scanned the details as she climbed the ladder to her cockpit. Boeing 737, northbound, 35,000 feet. Last known position over central Washington. Time to intercept. 8 minutes at full military power. Unknown individual at controls could mean anything. Terrorist, hijacker, disturbed passenger. Her job was to get eyes on that cockpit and report back. Raptor lead is up, she radioed, strapping in with practiced efficiency. Raptor 2 is up, Hawkins confirmed from the adjacent aircraft. The tower cleared them immediately. Raptor flight cleared for immediate takeoff, vectors to follow, time is critical. Torres slammed the throttles forward. The F-22's twin Pratt and Whitney engines roared to full afterburner, and the world became a blur of acceleration. The Raptor leaped off the runway like a missile, clawing skyward at an angle no commercial jet could match. Her G-suit inflated, squeezing her legs and abdomen to keep blood in her brain as the forces multiplied. 10,000 feet, 20,000, 30,000. Hawkins tucked in on her right wing, the two fighters moving as one lethal unit. Raptor leads Seattle Center. Flight 2847 is at your 12 o'clock, range 40 miles, altitude 35,000. They've begun descent. Be advised, situation is not hostile. Repeat, not hostile. We need visual confirmation of cockpit status. Copy Seattle, not hostile. What can you tell us about the pilot? A pause, then a voice that sounded strained, almost disbelieving. Raptor lead, be advised the individual at controls is reported to be an 11-year-old girl, female minor, claims to have simulator training. Both commercial pilots are incapacitated with food poisoning. Torres actually thought she'd misheard. Seattle, say again, did you say 11 years old? Affirmative, Raptor lead. Her name is Emma Rodriguez. She's flying on simulator experience only. This is her first time in an actual aircraft cockpit. Torres felt something cold slide down her spine. A child. A little girl was flying a Boeing 737 with 147 souls on board. Jesus, Hawkins breathed over the tactical frequency. Stay focused, Hawk, Torres snapped, but her own mind was reeling. She'd flown combat missions over hostile territory, engaged enemy aircraft, trained for every conceivable crisis. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for this. Raptor flight tally target at 11 o'clock, 5 miles, Hawkins called. Torres spotted it immediately. The distinctive shape of a 737 white fuselage gleaming in the afternoon sun, descending slowly through 32,000 feet. From this distance, it looked completely normal, peaceful, routine. But inside that cockpit, a sixth grader was fighting for her life and the lives of everyone on board. Seattle, Raptor lead has visual contact with Flight 2847, moving to close formation for cockpit inspection. Torres brought her F-22 in smoothly, bleeding off speed to match the commercial jet's pace. The Raptor could fly circles around the lumbering 737, but right now she needed to be gentle, precise. She couldn't risk spooking whoever was flying that plane. She pulled alongside the cockpit, about 50 feet off the left wing. And then she saw her. The girl was tiny, so impossibly small that at first Torres thought the seat was empty. But no, there she was, elevated on cushions, barely visible over the instrument panel. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. A child's face, round and young, staring intently at the displays in front of her. Both hands gripped the yoke. Emma Rodriguez, 11 years old. Flying a Boeing 737. Torres felt her throat tighten. The girl turned her head slightly, and their eyes met through the layers of reinforced glass. For one eternal moment, time seemed to stop. A fighter pilot and a child, suspended together at 30,000 feet, connected by the most fragile thread of hope and courage. Emma's eyes were wide but steady, scared but determined. She gave Torres a small, brave nod. Torres nodded back, a lump forming in her throat that had nothing to do with G-forces. Seattle Center, Raptor lead. Torres kept her voice professional despite the emotion churning in her chest. Visual confirmation. Pilot is indeed a minor, appears to be approximately 11 years old, female. She is seated in the captain's position with cushion elevation, both hands on controls. No signs of distress in the cockpit, no indication of hostile activity. This is a medical emergency, not a security threat. Copy, Raptor lead. NORAD is standing down threat protocols. You are cleared to maintain escort position. Hawkins pulled his F-22 alongside the right side of the 737. Through her canopy, Tors saw him shake his head in amazement. "Boss, she's actually flying it," he said quietly. "Look at her. She's maintaining altitude, holding heading. That's real piloting." He was right. Tors had seen enough incompetent flying to recognize skill when she saw it. The 737's wings were level. The descent rate was steady and controlled. The girl wasn't just sitting there hopping. She was actively flying the airplane. "She's got training," Tors said. "Real training. You don't fly like that on luck." Inside the 737's cabin, passengers had started noticing the fighter jets. Tors could see faces pressed against windows, some terrified, others oddly reassured by the military presence. A mother pointed at the F-22s, explaining something to her young son. An elderly man waved, his gesture almost absurdly cheerful given the circumstances. They didn't fully understand what was happening, didn't know that their survival depended entirely on the courage of a little girl who'd learned to fly in her grandfather's garage. But Tors knew, and it was breaking her heart and filling it with pride in equal measure. Raptor Flight 2847 is beginning approach preparations, Seattle Center announced. They'll be starting their final descent in approximately 10 minutes. Maintain escort through landing. Roger, Seattle. Raptor flight will escort to touchdown. Tors adjusted her position, tucking in closer to the 737. She could see Emma more clearly now. The intense concentration on her young face, the slight movement of her lips as she presumably talked to air traffic control, the way her small hands adjusted the controls with surprising confidence. This was someone's daughter, someone's granddaughter, a kid who should be in school doing homework, playing with friends. Instead, she was here in the most desperate situation imaginable, fighting to save lives. "Emma," Tors whispered, knowing the girl couldn't hear her. "You've got this, kiddo. We're right here with you." As if sensing Tors' thoughts, Emma glanced out the window again. Their eyes met once more. This time, Tors gave her a thumbs up, a fighter pilot's gesture of approval and encouragement. Emma's face brightened just slightly. She returned the gesture, her small thumb raised against the cockpit window. Then she turned back to her instruments, back to the impossible task ahead. "Hawk," Tors said over the tactical frequency, "if this kid pulls this off, I'm personally recommending her for the Air Force Academy when she's old enough." "If she pulls this off," Hawkins replied, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm buying her a damn fighter jet." Below them, Seattle was coming into view. The city sprawled across the landscape, Puget Sound glittering in the afternoon light. Somewhere in that urban maze was the airport, the runway, the emergency vehicles waiting for an outcome no one could predict. Tors tightened her formation, her F-22 now flying mere feet from the 737's wing. A guardian angel made of titanium and jet fuel. "Flight 2847, this is Raptor lead," she transmitted on the emergency frequency, breaking protocol but not caring. "We have you in sight. You're doing great. We're with you all the way to the ground." She didn't expect a response. Emma had enough to worry about without talking to fighter jets. But then a small voice came through the radio. Young, scared, but unbroken. "Thank you, Raptor lead. It helps knowing you're there." Tors blinked back tears that had no business being in a fighter pilot's eyes. "Always, kiddo," she whispered. "Always." The two F-22 Raptors and the Boeing 737 continued their descent together. 3 aircraft bound by an extraordinary moment that would be remembered for generations. And in the left seat of that 737, Emma Rodriguez flew on. "Emma, it's time." Captain Harrison's voice cut through the static, calm but carrying an undercurrent of gravity. "We're going to begin your approach now. Are you ready?" Emma stared at the instruments before her, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Below, through gaps in the clouds, she could see the patchwork of civilization, roads, buildings, the glittering expanse of Puget Sound. Somewhere down there was the runway. Somewhere down there was safety. Or death. "I'm ready," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Good girl, first step. I need you to contact SeaTac approach on frequency 119.2. That's going to be your landing frequency. Switch your radio now." Emma's fingers found the tuning knob, the movements automatic from countless simulator sessions. 119.2, Roger. The frequency crackled to life with new voices, new urgency. "Flight 2847, SeaTac approach. We have you on radar 40 miles north. Current altitude 28,000 feet. Winds at field are calm, visibility unlimited. Runway 16 right is cleared and ready. All other traffic has been diverted. The airport is yours." The airport is yours. 4 words that should have been empowering, but instead felt like an enormous weight settling on Emma's small shoulders. "SeaTac approach, 2847 copies," Emma replied. "Ready for approach vectors." Through her side window, she saw Major Torres in the F-22, still holding formation like a silver guardian angel. The fighter pilot gave her another thumbs up. Somehow, that simple gesture steadied Emma's nerves. 2847, descend and maintain 10,000 feet. Reduce speed to 250 knots. When you're ready, I want you to select vertical speed mode on your autopilot. Dial in negative 1,500 feet per minute. Nice and smooth. Emma's right hand moved to the mode control panel. She'd done this 1,000 times in the simulator. Her fingers found the vertical speed selector, rotated it to show minus 1,500 on the display. The nose of the 737 dipped gently. The descent had begun. Behind her, Kelly gripped the back of the co-pilot's seat, her knuckles white. "Oh God," she whispered, "this is really happening." "Kelly, I need you to make an announcement," Emma said without taking her eyes off the instruments. "Tell the passengers to prepare for landing. Seatbelts fastened, tray tables up, seats in upright position. Tell them to listen to the flight attendants and stay calm. Tell them," Emma's voice caught slightly, "tell them we're almost home." Kelly nodded and disappeared into the cabin. Moments later, Emma heard her voice over the PA, steady and professional despite the fear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Seattle. Please ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened." The altimeter unwound steadily. 27,000 feet, 25,000, 23,000. "You're doing beautifully, Emma," Captain Harrison said. "Perfect descent rate. Now I need you to start configuring the aircraft for landing. This is going to happen in stages. First, we'll extend flaps to 5 degrees. Do you see the flap lever?" "Yes, sir. Center console between the seats." "Correct. Move it to position 1. That's 5 degrees. You'll feel a slight buffet as they extend, but that's normal." Emma's hand closed around the flap lever. She pulled it back 1 notch. A mechanical whirring sound filled the cockpit. The aircraft shuddered slightly. Out the window, she could see the trailing edge of the wing changing shape as the flaps extended, increasing lift and drag. The plane slowed automatically, just like it should. "Flaps 5, speed checking down," Emma reported, hearing Papa's voice in her memory. "Always call out your configuration changes. Keep everyone in the loop." "Excellent, maintain current descent. Turn left heading 160. Emma disconnected the autopilot's heading mode and turned the yoke gently left. The massive aircraft responded smoothly, banking into the turn with the grace of a bird 10,000 times its size. The altimeter continued unwinding. 18,000 feet, 15,000, 12,000. Below, Seattle sprawled in increasing detail. She could make out individual buildings now, cars on highways, the distinctive shape of the Space Needle piercing the skyline. 2847, you're 22 miles from the runway. Descend and maintain 5,000 feet. Reduce speed to 210 knots. Extend flaps to 15. Emma's hands worked the controls methodically. Vertical speed adjusted, throttles reduced, flaps to position 3. The 737 continued its steady descent, now low enough that Emma could see boats on the water, people in parking lots, the ordinary world going about its ordinary day, unaware that above them, a child was fighting to land a commercial airliner. On the ground at SeaTac, emergency vehicles lined both sides of runway 16 right like soldiers at attention. 43 fire trucks, 26 ambulances, police cars, command vehicles, news vans with satellite dishes extended. Hundreds of emergency personnel stood ready, watching the sky, waiting for an aircraft that carried the hopes and fears of everyone watching. News helicopters circled at a safe distance, their cameras trained on the descending 737 and its F-22 escort. Across America, millions had stopped what they were doing to watch this drama unfold. In living rooms, offices, bars, and schools, people stared at screens showing a little girl attempting the impossible. In Phoenix, Emma's mother clutched her phone with white knuckles, watching a live news feed, tears streaming down her face. "Please, baby," she whispered, "please." 2847, you're 15 miles out. Descend and maintain 3,000 feet. This is your final descent altitude until you intercept the glide slope. Slow to 180 knots. Extend flaps to 30. Landing gear down. This was it, the critical configuration. Emma's breathing quickened. Flaps to 30, check. The aircraft slowed further, the nose rising slightly to maintain altitude. Now the landing gear. Emma's hand found the gear lever, a wheel-shaped handle on the right side of the instrument panel. She pulled it down. An enormous grinding, whirring sound filled the cockpit. Emma felt the vibration through her seat as 3 massive sets of wheels lowered into the wind stream. The plane shuddered, buffeted by the increased drag. 3 green lights appeared on the instrument panel. Nose gear down and locked. Left main gear down and locked. Right main gear down and locked. Gear down 3 green, Emma announced, her voice shaking slightly. Beautiful, Emma. You're configured for landing. Now we wait for the glide slope. The instrument landing system appeared on Emma's display, a vertical line representing the localizer, keeping her aligned with the runway center line, and a horizontal line representing the glide slope, the perfect 3-degree descent path to the runway. 2847, you are 10 miles from touchdown. Turn right heading 165. Intercept the localizer. Emma made the turn. The vertical line on her display centered perfectly. Localizer captured, she reported. Outstanding. Now watch for the glide slope. When that horizontal line starts moving down toward the center, you're going to follow it. Reduce your vertical speed to match. The glide slope will guide you right to the runway threshold. Emma watched, waited, her hands trembled on the yoke. The glide slope indicator began moving. "Glide slope alive," she called out. "Follow it down, Emma. Adjust your descent rate. About 700 feet per minute now. Reduce power slightly." Emma pushed the yoke forward gently. The nose dropped. The altimeter began unwinding faster. She pulled the throttles back a fraction of an inch. 3,000 feet, 2,500 feet, 2,000 feet. Through the windscreen she could finally see it. Runway 16 right, a strip of gray concrete stretching into the distance, emergency vehicles lining both sides, lights flashing like a parade of warning and hope. The F-22s broke formation, pulling up and away to give her room. Emma felt suddenly alone, but then Major Torres' voice came through. "You've got this, Emma. Bring her home." 1,500 feet. The ground rushed up with terrifying speed now. She could see individual trees, cars, buildings. Everything was happening so fast. "Speed check 145 knots, Captain Harrison guided. Perfect approach speed. Keep it steady. You're looking beautiful." 1,000 feet. Emma's hands were slick with sweat. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. 500 feet. You're right on target, don't change anything. Papa's voice echoed in her memory. Trust the instruments, Mija. Trust your training. 300 feet. The runway threshold passed beneath her. The white touchdown zone markers appeared, racing toward her. Start your flare, Emma. Gently pull back just a little. Let the nose come up. 100 feet. Emma pulled back on the yoke, feeling the nose rise, bleeding off speed, settling toward the concrete. 50 feet. 30 feet. 20 feet. The main wheels kissed the runway with a solid thump, not perfect but controlled, safe. Emma pushed the throttles to idle and pulled the speed brake lever. The 737 settled onto its nose gear, and she applied smooth, steady pressure to the brakes. The cabin erupted in screams, not terror but pure, explosive relief and joy. Emma had done it. She'd landed the plane. Everyone was alive. For 3 eternal seconds, Emma sat frozen in the captain's seat, unable to process what had just happened. Her hands still gripped the yoke with white-knuckled intensity. Her feet pressed hard against the rudder pedals, keeping the aircraft tracking straight down the center line. The speed brake was deployed, the thrust reversers engaged, and the massive Boeing 737 was decelerating exactly as it should. She'd landed the plane. She'd actually landed the plane. Behind her, the cabin exploded in a symphony of human emotion. Passengers screamed, sobbed, laughed hysterically. Strangers embraced. A man was shouting, thank God, over and over. Someone started clapping, and within seconds the entire cabin thundered with applause that shook the walls. Brakes, Emma, keep steady pressure on the brakes, Captain Harrison's voice cut through her daze. You're doing great, slow her down, nice and easy. Emma's feet pushed harder, the speed bled off, 80 knots, 60 knots, 40 knots. Through the windscreen, she could see the emergency vehicles racing alongside the aircraft, matching its speed. Fire trucks with lights strobing, ambulances ready, their crews watching this miracle unfold in real time. Speed under taxi pace. When you're ready, turn right off the runway at the next taxiway. Just follow the blue lights. Emma's hands shook violently now, adrenaline crashing through her system like a tidal wave. She turned the yoke right, adding a touch of right rudder, and the 737 lumbered off the active runway onto the taxiway. Full stop here, Emma. Set the parking brake. She pulled the parking brake lever. The aircraft settled with a final, relieved sigh of hydraulics. They were stopped. They were safe. They were home. Flight 2847, see TAC approach. The controller's voice was thick with emotion. You are stopped safely on taxiway Charlie. Aircraft secured. Emergency crews are approaching now. Emma, on behalf of everyone here, that was the most incredible piece of flying anyone has ever witnessed. You saved every single person on that aircraft. Emma tried to respond, but no words would come. Her throat had closed completely, tears streaming down her face. Kelly burst into the cockpit and wrapped Emma in a fierce embrace, pulling her from the seat. You did it. Oh my God, you did it. You amazing, incredible, brilliant girl. The flight attendant was sobbing openly now, and Emma found herself sobbing too. All the fear and terror and desperate courage of the last 90 minutes pouring out in great, gasping sobs. Behind them, passengers crowded the cockpit door, all trying to see the little girl who'd saved their lives. A businessman pushed through, tears on his face. Thank you, he choked out. My daughter is your age. Thank you for bringing me home to her. The elderly couple from row 12 appeared next. God bless you, sweetheart. God bless you. The young mother with the baby pressed forward, the infant clutched to her chest. You gave my son his future. How do I ever thank you for that? Emma couldn't speak, could only cry and nod as passenger after passenger reached out to touch her shoulder, her arm, her hand. human contact affirming that they were real, they were alive, they had survived. Marcus appeared with the two unconscious pilots, now on portable stretchers. Paramedics were already boarding through the emergency exits, swarming the incapacitated men. "They're stabilizing," he announced. "They're going to be okay. Everyone's going to be okay." Outside, emergency vehicles had surrounded the aircraft. Firefighters stood ready with foam cannons, though they wouldn't be needed. Paramedics waited at the doors. News helicopters hovered at a respectful distance, cameras capturing every moment for the millions watching around the world. And above it all, the two F-22 Raptors circled lazily, their presence a continued watch over the miracle below. Emma stood on shaking legs, Kelly supporting her, when she realized she was still wearing the headset. She'd forgotten to take it off. The earpiece still pressed against her ear, now slick with sweat and tears. Then it crackled to life. Not on the approach frequency, not on ground control. This was different, a direct transmission on the emergency guard frequency, the one every aircraft monitored, the one reserved for only the most critical communications. A breach of protocol, a breaking of the sacred radio silence that fighter pilots maintained. Flight 2847, this is Raptor Lead. Major Lisa Torres' voice came through clearly, and Emma could hear the emotion beneath the professional military bearing. "We know who you are, Emma Rodriguez." In the cockpit, Kelly froze, Emma's breath caught. 11 years old, from Phoenix, Arizona, granddaughter of Captain Miguel Rodriguez, who flew for 33 years and who would be so incredibly proud of you right now. Emma's vision blurred with fresh tears. "You just became the youngest person in history to land a commercial aircraft. 147 souls on board. 147 people who get to go home tonight because of your courage, your training, and your refusal to give up when the impossible stared you in the face." Through the cockpit window, Emma could see the F-22s above, their polished surfaces gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Your grandfather taught you well, Emma. He trained you for this moment, even if neither of you knew it. You honored his legacy today in the most extraordinary way possible." Torres' voice paused, and when it continued it was rougher, more raw. "On behalf of the United States Air Force, on behalf of every pilot who has ever strapped into an aircraft and trusted their training when everything went wrong, welcome to the family of aviators, Emma Rodriguez. You're one of us now. You've earned your wings in the hardest way possible, and you did it with more courage than most of us will ever know." Emma's legs gave out. She sank to the cockpit floor, the headset still pressed to her ear, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "Raptor Flight is honored to have escorted you home. Now go hug your grandmother. Go see your mother. Go be an 11-year-old kid who just did the impossible." A pause then. "Raptor Flight saluting." Through tear-blurred eyes, Emma watched through the windscreen as the two F-22 Raptors broke their lazy circle. They dropped lower, approaching the taxiway where the 737 sat. Major Torres and Captain Hawkins brought their fighters in side by side, barely 100 feet off the ground, moving in perfect synchronization. As they passed directly over the Boeing, both F-22s performed a slow, graceful aileron roll, one of the most difficult and beautiful aerial maneuvers, a fighter pilot's highest form of respect and salute. The passengers who could see through the windows erupted in fresh cheers, many not understanding the significance but feeling it nonetheless. Emma understood. She understood that she'd just been honored by warriors of the sky, by the guardians who defended their nation from above, by pilots whose skill and courage defined what it meant to fly. The F-22s completed their roll, climbed steeply into the brilliant blue, and disappeared, two silver streaks vanishing into the heavens like guardian angels returning home after a job well done. Kelly knelt beside Emma on the cockpit floor, wrapping her in another embrace. "Did you hear that, honey? Did you hear what they said? You're a hero, a real hero." But Emma didn't feel like a hero. She felt small and scared and overwhelmed, and so incredibly grateful to be alive. Paramedics appeared at the cockpit door. "We need to check her out. Possible shock, dehydration." "I'm okay," Emma managed between sobs. "I'm okay. I just want my mom, I want my grandma, I want to go home." "You will, sweetheart," Kelly promised. "Very soon, but first there are a lot of people who want to thank you." They helped Emma to her feet. Her legs wobbled like a newborn foal's, but she managed to stay upright. As they guided her toward the cabin, every passenger stood, every single one. And they applauded. Not the wild, relieved applause of the landing. This was different, deeper, more profound. This was gratitude, recognition, love. Emma walked down the aisle in a daze, touching the hands that reached out to her, seeing the tear-streaked faces, hearing the endless chorus of thank you that followed her like a prayer. At the door, she paused and looked back one last time at the cockpit, at the seat where she'd sat, the controls she'd mastered, the impossible task she'd completed. Papa's watch pressed against her leg in her pocket. "We did it, Papa," she whispered. "We brought them home." Then Emma Rodriguez stepped out of the aircraft and into history. The moment Emma's feet touched the tarmac, the world exploded around her. Camera flashes erupted like lightning from behind the barricades. News helicopters thundered overhead. Emergency personnel who'd been holding their breath for 90 agonizing minutes rushed forward, not with stretchers, but with smiles and tears and outstretched hands wanting to touch the miracle they'd just witnessed. But Emma saw none of it. Because running across the tarmac, security personnel trying and failing to hold her back, was her mother. "Emma! Mom!" They collided in the middle of the taxiway, Emma's small body disappearing into her mother's fierce embrace. Maria Rodriguez dropped to her knees, clutching her daughter, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. "I thought I'd lost you. Oh God, baby, I thought I'd lost you." "I'm okay, Mama, I'm okay. Papa taught me, he taught me everything." Behind them, Grandma Rosa arrived in a wheelchair pushed by an airport worker, her face wet with tears. "Mi nieta, mi preciosa nieta." They held each other on the tarmac as the sun began its descent toward the Pacific. 3 generations of Rodriguez women bound together by love and loss, and an impossible act of courage. Paramedics finally convinced Emma to let them check her vital signs. Blood pressure elevated but stable, heart rate rapid but strong, mild dehydration, signs of shock and exhaustion, nothing that time and rest wouldn't heal. But the emotional examination would take much longer. The story exploded across every media platform on Earth within an hour. Miracle at 35,000 feet. 11-year-old girl lands commercial jet. Child pilot SAVES, 147 lives. Grandfather's legacy. How flight simulator training prevented tragedy. Emma's face appeared on every news channel, every website, every social media feed. The footage of the landing, captured by dozens of cameras, played in an endless loop. The world watched in awe as a little girl did what seemed impossible. The aviation industry reacted with a mixture of shock, admiration, and frantic policy review. How could this have happened? How did simulator training translate so perfectly to real-world crisis? Should regulations be changed? Should they be celebrated? Boeing's CEO called personally. "Miss Rodriguez, your grandfather would be extraordinarily proud. What you did today will be studied in flight schools for generations." The FAA launched an investigation, but the conclusion was inevitable. Emma Rodriguez had committed no violation. She had responded to an emergency with the only tools available: her training, her courage, and her refusal to surrender to fear. No charges, no penalties, only commendation. 4 days later, Captain Reynolds and First Officer Martinez, fully recovered from their ordeal, requested a meeting with Emma. They met in a private room at the Seattle Marriott, away from the media circus. Both men wore their uniforms, though they hadn't been cleared to fly yet. When Emma walked in with her mother, Captain Reynolds's eyes filled with tears. He knelt down to Emma's level. "Miss Rodriguez, I owe you my life. We both do. Everyone on that plane does." "I just did what my papa taught me," Emma said quietly. "Your papa taught you to be a pilot, a real one, better than many I've flown with in 30 years. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that gleamed gold in the light. His captain's wings, the pin he'd worn for 3 decades. "I want you to have these. You've earned them more than most people who wear them." Emma's hands trembled as he pinned the wings to her shirt. First Officer Martinez stepped forward. "I've been flying for 8 years. I thought I knew what courage looked like. Then an 11-year-old girl showed me what real courage is, stepping up when everyone else has failed, when the odds are impossible, when giving up would be easier than trying." He handed Emma a leather flight logbook embossed with her name. "For all the flights to come. And Emma, that first entry is already written. Flight 2847, the most important flight in aviation history." The recognition continued for months. The president invited Emma to the White House, where she received the Presidential Citizens Medal for extraordinary heroism. The Congressional Gold Medal followed, the youngest recipient in history. Boeing established the Miguel Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship Fund, guaranteeing Emma full funding for any aviation education she chose to pursue. Southwest Airlines, her grandfather's former employer, granted Emma lifetime unlimited flights and created a youth aviation program in her honor. But the moment that meant the most came 6 weeks after the landing, when a military staff car pulled up to Emma's home in Phoenix. Major Lisa Torres and Captain James Hawkins stepped out in full dress uniform, medals gleaming on their chests. "Miss Rodriguez," Torres said formally, then broke into a warm smile. "We promised we'd come visit." They spent the afternoon in Papa's garage, in the simulator where it had all begun. Torres sat in the co-pilot's seat while Emma flew a practice approach, Hawkins watching over their shoulders. "You're smooth," Torres observed. "Really smooth, natural talent combined with excellent training. Papa used to say the plane wants to fly. My job is just to guide it, not force it." "Your papa was a wise man. Emma, I want you to know something." Torres turned serious. "The Air Force Academy is watching you. They've already started a file. When you're old enough, if you want it, there's a place waiting for you. Fighter pilot track, the whole path. You'd be following in the footsteps of the greatest aviators in history." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Really? You've already proven you have what it takes: courage under pressure, grace in crisis, the willingness to act when others freeze. Those are qualities we can't teach. You're born with them or you're not. You have them." Before they left, Hawkins presented Emma with squadron patches from their F-22 unit and a handwritten letter from every pilot in their squadron, each expressing their respect and admiration. "Welcome to the family, little eagle," he said, using the call sign they'd already given her. "We'll be watching your career with great interest." 6 years later, 17-year-old Emma Rodriguez stood at the gates of the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, acceptance letter clutched in her hand. Early admission, full scholarship, fighter pilot track. The journey from that terrifying afternoon to this moment had transformed her in ways she was still discovering. The media attention had eventually faded. The world had moved on to other stories, but Emma had stayed focused on the sky. Advanced flight training, regular lessons from retired commercial pilots who volunteered their time, hundreds more hours in simulators, her first real flights in small aircraft with instructors who looked at her with a mixture of awe and respect. And every night she'd sit in Papa's garage, in the simulator where it all began, and practice. Always practice, because that's what pilots do. But before reporting to the academy, There was one stop she needed to make. The Phoenix Cemetery was quiet in the early morning light. Emma walked the familiar path to Papa Miguel's grave, her Air Force Academy acceptance folder under her arm. The headstone was simple: Captain Miguel Rodriguez. He taught the sky to generations. Emma knelt and placed her captain's wings, the ones Captain Reynolds had given her, on the smooth granite. Beside them, she set her acceptance letter. I got in, Papa, full ride, fighter pilot track just like Major Torres promised. I'm going to fly for both of us now. I'm going to make you proud every single day. The morning breeze whispered through the cemetery trees. Emma stood, straightening her shoulders, feeling the weight of her future settling comfortably across them. She wasn't the scared 11-year-old girl anymore. That day had forged her into something new, something stronger. She was a pilot. Not because of a single impossible landing, but because she'd learned that when life demands the extraordinary, you rise to meet it. You trust your training. You trust yourself. You trust that somewhere, somehow, the people who loved you are still guiding your hands. Emma touched the headstone one last time. Thank you for the simulator, Papa. Thank you for the training. Thank you for believing a little girl could do impossible things. I'll see you in the sky. She turned and walked back toward her car, toward the academy, toward a future filled with clouds and contrails, and the endless blue that her grandfather had loved so deeply. Above her, a commercial jet traced a white line across the morning sky, people traveling safely, trusting pilots they'd never meet, never knowing that one of those pilots had learned her most important lesson at 11 years old. That heroes come in unexpected forms. That courage has no age limit. That preparation meets opportunity when lives hang in the balance. And that sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible is simply what we accomplish before we realize we can't. Emma Rodriguez drove toward her future, the morning sun rising behind her, the whole sky waiting ahead. Her journey was just beginning. The end.